Welcome to Your Family's Health, the program that focuses on healthcare issues with unique and different modalities for taking charge of your health today. Experts talk weekly with our continuing roster of guests from around the country and right here in Nassau County to keep you up to date on the latest health issues and trends. Take care of your mind, body, and soul. Spend the next half hour with the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, and get on the journey to better health.
Hello and welcome to Your Family's Health. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College, along with Nassau Community College student Gina Peter. And today we're going to talk about a disease that you probably never heard of, but it's important to talk about. It's Kearns Sayre Syndrome.
KSS is a rare neuromuscular disorder that causes progressive limitation of eye movements until there's complete immobility, accompanied by eyelid droop. It is also associated with abnormal accumulation of pigmented material on the membrane lining in the eyes.
Our guest today is Loretta McGovern, whose son, Cavan, was diagnosed with KSS. Loretta, welcome to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first of all, I hope you're doing okay in light of this pandemic. And has this personally affected you or your family?
Thankfully, no one in my immediate house has had it. We've been really overly cautious to make sure that it doesn't come in the home to keep Cavan safe. Unfortunately, my husband's stepfather did pass from it. So,
sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
So when was Cavan diagnosed and how old is he now?
Cavan is 11 years now. He was diagnosed when he was 8 after kind of an interesting group of symptoms that were showing up. Led us to kind of an alternate diagnosis and then ultimately to the correct diagnosis, which was, of course, shocking.
So can you tell us what Cavan was like before this diagnosis? And is this diagnosis, does it run in families? Is it hereditary? Tell us about it.
So Cavan, when he was born, typical young, healthy, completely normal child, except as I would say when he was in kindergarten, we started to note some changes that were abnormal. My husband and I are both pretty hardcore athletes and are, have studied biomechanics in terms of movement. And we noted that Cavan would favor one side, or if he tried to do normal movements for children like hopping on one leg, he would fall to the ground. His kindergarten teacher also reported he would fall out of his desk, and she kind of joked about it and was kind of laughing about it. And the minute I heard that, I was horrified. I knew something was terribly wrong. And we contacted our doctors, and his muscle weakness, he had muscle weakness, but we brought him to endocrinology, and ultimately they diagnosed him as just not producing growth hormones. So he was on growth hormone treatment, but we started to, and we thought that was it. That was what I knew in my gut. We were missing something. But then about a year or so later, he started to have ptosis, which is the lowering of the eyelids, to the point where Cavan would have to tilt his head back to even see anything. And people would always say how tired he looks. But it was the fact that he's missing so much genetic material in his mitochondria that he doesn't actually have the muscle strength to keep his eyelids up, something that we all take obviously for granted. So mitochondrial disease is when mitochondrial, if you remember from your high school biology class, is the powerhouse of the cells. Mitochondrial disease is when the mitochondria are missing some of that genetic material. So in KSS, Kearns Sayre Syndrome, more than half of that mitochondrial DNA is missing. In Cavan's very specific case, he's missing about half of the mitochondrial DNA is missing in all his affected cells, and 2/3 of his cells are affected. So any cells that, so his cells are not producing energy, but any organs that require energy to be able to function are affected. And these would be the brain, the heart, eyes, eyelids, ears, skeletal muscles. And that's why he had the ptosis. Upon realizing that there is an issue, we brought him to get his hearing evaluated, which at the time I thought was like for a baseline. I was horrified to learn that it had already hit his hearing and that he needed hearing aids. And then we brought him for genetic screening and then also for a brain MRI. And the brain MRI, in the course of essentially about a year and a half since we first learned he wasn't producing growth hormone, until we realized the ptosis was pointing to something much more significant. In that period of time, his brain scan went from being normal to showing both changes in the white and the gray matter of his brain, and in his spinal cord as well, we've learned. And that was the clear proof that he had KSS, along with genetic testing that confirmed that diagnosis.
Since the diagnosis, has his interests or hobbies changed? How is he coping with all of this?
I would say in terms of coping, when upon the diagnosis, I think he was quite upset, but he doesn't understand, and we've never discussed the severity of the disease, although I think intrinsically he's getting a little older. I think he understands, and he's certainly experiencing the changes to his body. In September, we've had to put a pacemaker in because he was getting right bundle branch block. So he understands and he gets upset that he needs to continue to go in for surgeries. But in terms of his interests, he's super interested in science and technology, and he's involved in, even though he's fully remote, he's involved in the play through a virtual platform. He likes to walk with us for exercise. So I think that's status quo. But for him, if you ask him what it's like to live with this kind of diagnosis, he just says it's normal. This is what he knows, and he doesn't see it as anything different from anybody else. You know, he's a warrior. He's a trooper. He just keeps plugging on, and you would never know. He's not a child who will allow himself to sit still. He's in Boy Scouts, but he gets exhausted much, much faster than a normal child would.
So how rare is KSS? Is it genetic? Can it be caught?
It's not quite 1 in a million. There are some estimates that say like 1 in every 125,000. It's pretty rare. Mitochondrial disease in itself is pretty rare, but KSS is even more rare of a specific subset of mitochondrial disease. For KSS, 96% of those that are diagnosed with KSS, it's actually spontaneous. Most mitochondrial disease come from the mother because the child inherits the mitochondria from mom. However, with KSS, they don't understand where it comes from. When Cavan was diagnosed, I had to immediately be tested, my mother and all my children, to see if everyone had it. And thankfully, he's the only one, obviously not thankful for him, but that it wasn't the kind that was genetically passed on. But that's one of the reasons why we do need research and a cure, because we need to figure out, well, why is KSS happening? What's causing it to occur spontaneously? Because if we can get to that kind of root issue, then perhaps children don't need to live with this.
What would be the treatments for KSS?
Unfortunately, there are no treatments for KSS. When it comes to mitochondrial disease and KSS quite specifically, there are supplements, vitamin supplements, which you can imagine is not what a mother wants to hear. When you get a diagnosis, you want to hear, okay, what do we do next? Cancer, there's chemotherapy. What do we do here? And then to be told, well, your child can be given some over-the-counter vitamins. I mean, it's a little ridiculous, but some supplements are CoQ10, B vitamins, leucovorin, and these are supplements basically that there are supplements that help the cells produce more energy, anything that would help the organs be able to better function. And then unfortunately, besides vitamins and growth hormone shots that he gets every night and a pacemaker, you have to treat the organs as they're affected. So unfortunately, a lot of KSS kids get diabetes. We'll treat the diabetes when it comes. When it gets to heart block, we get a pacemaker. When it comes to hearing loss, he gets hearing aids, and then potentially in the future, maybe a cochlear implant. He's had surgery for the ptosis to bring the eyelids up so he can see. Glasses, it's really surgeries in the moment, medicine to treat urological issues that are emerging. There is no cure. It's treatment as we know it's going to progress. It's a progressive, incurable disease, unfortunately.
Can you tell us about your efforts to find a cure for your son and other children with similar diagnosis?
Absolutely. My husband and I have had past work with another fundraising organization. So we knew that, when people are motivated, that a lot can happen in terms of making a difference. So really quickly, right after we got diagnosed, we asked Cavan if we had his permission to share his story in the hope that we could raise money. So we got linked up with United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, UMDF for short. And we asked about possibilities of being able to see if we could fundraise and then have them do scientific research for us to see who we could invest in. So UMDF told us that if we could raise $100,000, we could guarantee that money was earmarked only for KSS research. So that was our goal. And then very shortly, we not only made that $100,000, but we're up to $250,000. So far, we've used $100,000 to invest in a study by Dr. Sabatini with MIT. And he's basically looking at ways scientifically to coax the cells to produce more energy in a way to kind of bypass the malfunctioning mitochondria. So we've invested in him. It's a 2-year study. And then we have an additional $150,000 that we're looking to invest in future research and then keep the funds coming in so we can every year be funding another grant or another research cycle, a scientific study to ultimately lead to clinical trials and medication that, even if it doesn't lead to a cure, can be treatment and allow the children to produce enough energy so that the organs can function in a way that's life-sustaining.
You're listening to Your Family's Health on the Voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard, along with Nassau Community College student Gina Peter. And today we're learning about a disease called Kearns Sayre Syndrome, a rare neuromuscular disorder that causes progressive limitation of the eye movement until there is complete immobility, accompanied by eyelid droop. Our guest today is Loretta McGovern, whose son Cavan was diagnosed with KSS. So what would you say is your biggest challenge as a mom of a child with such a rare disease?
Biggest challenge would have to be that no one has heard of it. And unfortunately, and ironically, that includes the doctors that we go to. And they can lead to very frustrating exchanges. I've had episodes where we have gone into neurosurgeons and they meet with us for the first time. And one neurosurgeon actually said to me, I've just Googled KSS, which makes me the resident expert on Kearns Sayre Syndrome. And as a mom, I could not have been more insulted that he, a little blurb through a quick internet study, and he felt like he knew all that he needed to know about KSS when there's so much that we don't know about KSS. So I think the biggest challenge is to learn as much as we can as moms, and then to go into these doctor's appointments and be a real advocate for our children. I've had to fight cardiology to explain why in KSS cases, you do not wait for a pacemaker. You do not wait and see. When my son was first initially shown heart block, the cardiologist initially did not report it to us. It was our mitochondrial doctor that noted that, contacted me, and I called the cardiologist and said, I need to speak to an EP surgeon immediately. And then he did. He was scheduled for a pacemaker within a week. Because it's so rare and there's so little out there, the doctors only know their specialty, but don't know enough about a disorder where so many of these organs are linked together and create, this kind of cascade of symptoms. But even recently, we went to an endocrinologist who looked at me and said, well, what's new? And I said he had a pacemaker in September. And she looked at me very seriously and said, wow, I wonder if this is all connected. And my heart sunk because I thought, clearly I haven't done enough to educate her on KSS. And I had to explain, yes, these are all connected. And she said, well, what's the next thing to look for? I said, diabetes. And she said, well, who's watching him for that? And I had to point out that she was an endocrinologist. I would assume this would be her job. So that is very frustrating. And I tried to not get too upset and try to bite my tongue and just know that the only way I can help him is to do the research, to show them that I'm in it with them. I'll be a very kind team member, as long as we're all devoted to making sure he gets the best medical care possible.
So how many physicians are currently managing your son, and what are their specialties? I'm hearing the endocrinologist and neurologist.
Yeah, we joke around. He's like the most doctors for the youngest person that I know. Endocrinology, urology, cardiology, mito specialist, neurology. He's got a geneticist. We've got ophthalmologist. We've got audiologist. GI. We just went to GI recently.
Gastroenterologist. Yeah.
Yes. We've seen neurosurgeons. Thankfully, we haven't needed to go that route. I can't even think what I'm missing now. What body part is remaining? He sees PT and OT for muscle strength. So we've really hit every significant pulmonology. We see him as well. We've hit every major area.
So how is you as a mom, how do you facilitate this collaborative kind of practice amongst the physicians so that they're all on the same page with pushing your son towards managing this disease, this rare disease?
That's a great question. We try to keep a team together. Unfortunately, the best mito facility is CHOP, and that is not the easiest commute from here in Long Island. You're talking about 2.5, 3 hour appointments, which with 4 children at home would be very difficult. But we do have a great mito team in Columbia Presbyterian Hospital under Dr. Michio Hirano, who's really well-known worldwide expert on mitochondrial disease. And he tries to give us specialists within his hospital system. So at least we're all following the same records. Unfortunately, at times we do need, like the endocrinologist is outside of the system, but based on the conversation I had recently, it does make me think that we need to reevaluate that choice and get someone else that could function better as a team. But I also, as a mom or anyone out there that has a child with special needs, I think you really have to be super organized. The first thing I did upon diagnosis was old school binder with 20 different dividers for every different body part, and keep my records there and keep the school reports. And that way, whenever you go to the hospital for a checkup at any moment, the mito doc could say, I need a lung test, and then we need to have our pulmonology records. So I just try to have that. We try to have an ER package in both cars in case we have to go to the emergency immediately. And I've got the protocol list for, drug treatment plan and what to avoid, because in an emergency, they can't give him certain medications or IV treatments. And if there's too little time, we might not have time for them to look it up. We need to have records in the car ready to go to be the best advocates for him as possible.
Does insurance cover all of the doctors and all of the treatments?
Another good question. Really good question. My insurance is pretty good. A lot of the doctors are covered. The mito doctor was not originally covered, but he's since, thank the Lord, taken our insurance. The vitamin supplements are not covered. Many mitochondrial parents struggle financially here to be able to give them the treatment because insurance does not cover this.
You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard, along with Nassau Community College student Gina Peter. And today we're learning about a disease called Kearns Sayre Syndrome, a rare neuromuscular disorder that causes progressive limitation of the eye movements until there is complete immobility, accompanied by eyelid droop. Our guest today is Loretta McGovern, whose son Cavan was diagnosed with KSS. How has this affected the family dynamic? I understand they're siblings. How does this now interfere or better the relationship amongst the family?
That's a great question. It has, I believe, brought the children closer. I think all my three other children are younger. Cavan is going to soon be 12. I have a current 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an almost 3-year-old. The almost 3-year-old doesn't understand, but the other children live through the fear of diagnosis and they live through a lot of the doctor's appointments. Sometimes they get jealous because I might spend extra time at Cavan going to doctor's appointments, or my husband and I might have to go in together before COVID when we could actually both be at hospitals together. So they would get a little jealous and look for that quality time. But I think they embrace him. They see him as just their big brother. And they even little things, if they raise money or they want to have a lemonade stand, I've had one of his brothers give me money and say, please donate this to Cavan's research grant. So they do little things like that to make sure that he gets the care that he needs and protects them.
Is Cavan connected with other kids that are facing similar battles?
Yes and no. Yes, because through social media and social networking, I have been able to link up with some KSS moms. There are Facebook groups and other social media platforms that are able to unite us across the world. And then there's a family in Pennsylvania who has a child that is his age. So they've gotten to know each other and to visit, and we've had camping trip together with that family. The MDA has an umbrella organization, and they do a game night on Saturday. And even though it's virtual, he's getting to know other kids like him. Due to COVID, there's a camp in the summer for a week for these children. He has yet to go, but he's excited, and he knows in these moments he will meet children like him. And then I think before he was diagnosed, when he had the ptosis, he would come home and the kids would make fun of him. In fact, he came home one time and told me, "Mom, they're telling me I must have a lot to drink." And poor thing didn't even understand. They were essentially, I don't know if it was parent influenced or not, they were suggesting he was drunk because the lids were so low. And then at that point, that's when we decided to go public. And since we did share our story, the bullying, the teasing, the comments, people were educated and it stopped. And our community rallied around us. They continue to help us. They've helped us do fundraisers. They have his teacher hosted a bar night one night to help us raise money for the research grant. So it's been very supportive, and he's had a really great core group of friends that have emerged to really protect him during hospital visits and whatnot.
So if someone wanted to donate to KSS, is there a foundation, and how can one donate to this wonderful foundation?
So we have a research grant with the UMDF, United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation. The website is www.umdf.org/Cavan McGovern, CAVAN, Cavan, MCGOVERN. Or if people cannot remember that, even if they contacted the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation and asked about Cavan, they know Cavan, they know of his grant, but every single cent goes exclusively to cures and to finance scientific studies to advance treatment. Not a single penny comes to us personally, not in our pocket. It goes through the UMDF, a nonprofit organization, and the scientific panel vets any proposals that come in and narrows it down to their top 3. And then as parents of the KSS child, we're able to pick, along with that research team, the scientific panel, which one we think is the best, the most worthwhile in terms of an investment.
What advice would you give to other moms and parents facing similar battles?
Do research, make sure you really understand the disease so that you can have intelligent conversations with doctors and they don't feel like you're uninformed and therefore they can minimize your concerns. My other advice would definitely be to network, to get in social media, find your core group of moms that are like you, that are like-minded, that are goal-driven, that want to not just treat your child at home, but make a difference and change the world. And I've found a couple of groups of women that are similarly minded, and it gives me hope that a group of moms can make a difference and can actually hope in this lifetime find worthwhile treatments.
So tell me, I know that you as a mom and are dealing with this progressive illness with your son. Where do you go as caregiver to become recharged and refreshed as you go forward in the care of your son?
I wish I had an easy answer, and I wish someone could help me on that one. It's hard, to be honest with you. There are days when we'll come back from, I'll never forget, from the pacemaker surgery. I came back and collapsed physically to the ground. I could not stand, but I was fine. I could be everything my son needed. But the minute we walked in that door, I could not get off the ground. My husband had to get me to a bed, and I spent 24 hours in a bed and couldn't move. And I've discussed that with other KSS moms, and we know it, we understand it. So we try to always check in on each other after the surgeries, knowing that you're so strong. And then at the end, when you finally can take the breath, that's when that body gives out. So just, again, I have this group of women, of 4 other moms, and we just text all the time. Any little thing. I mean, I know more about their child's health, I suspect, than maybe their own family members. That's how, much we share. And if someone's on their way to a hospital, they'll contact me and I'll do quick research, send it to them so that they can drive their son to the hospital, not worry about it. I mean, so I would say that's where I get the strength from, other moms, and we can joke about it and we can mock ourselves and we can curse at the illness, laugh at it, cry with each other. Whenever there's another loss in the community of a child that dies of KSS, we cry, we call each other, and then we try to joke and then meet for a Zoom call with a glass of wine in our hand and try to regroup.
So I just wanted to say that I just want to congratulate you and salute you for the great work that you do with your son and this rare progressive disease, and how you've been able to not only be the caregiver, but to stay strengthened through the process of keeping it together. So we want to thank you for being here, Loretta McGovern.
Thank you so much for having. The awareness is so important for us. Thank you so much.
Whose son, Cavan, was diagnosed with Kearns Sayre Syndrome. We hope you and Cavan stay safe and continue to stay healthy. And thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me.
This is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College, along with student Gina Peter. And we want to thank you for listening to this week's edition of Your Family's Health.
We'd like to get your feedback on your family's health. Send your comments by emailing them to whpc@ncc.edu. Podcasts of today's show are available on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This program was produced at the studios of Nassau Community College in cooperation with the nursing department. Join us next week for another edition of Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.